All right, everyone. So we have a super special episode here for you today. We decided to reach back into our sack of pre-owner underwaters and pick out someone to be sort of a blast from the past and do sort of a catch-up episode. So I was really excited to do this, and I this particular guest, Tapatío, as many of you will likely remember,
the best sauce.
The well, that ended up sprouting some controversy towards the end of the interview. But Tapatío came back on and just sort of caught us up on his journey through the practice that we consulted him on. I think this was probably one of the first practices that were talked about on the pursuit of ownership that actually had someone follow through with it. We've had a handful of them happen. I think this was one of the earlier ones. And so, super excited for you guys to hear how that went. I got tons of questions about this particular interview and people wanting to kind of know how they worked out and how they could find practices like this. So if you haven't heard the original episode, I highly recommend going back to around July of 2020 and listening to Tapatío's episode. It was wonderful. Payton, what do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely good to get a nice little follow-up, especially on a practice that was as promising as his looked before you bought it. And I think just these next couple episodes here will definitely give the listeners a good view of the other side. He kind of talks about how he's like, it's a lot better when you're out, you own your own practice, you're like making some money. And I know, like, for me, and I'm sure probably for you too, it's really good to hear from people that have already graduated and are on to, bigger and better things. So he does a very good job of showing that in these next couple episodes.
Yeah, for sure. And, this was definitely one of the best practice opportunities that we ever really consulted anybody on. And I think that's still probably true. It was two practices being sold as one. And, there was a fairly decent amount of capacity. So it was just it was teed up as something that was going to be that large practice acquisition that still had some low hanging fruit. I think the hygiene percentage was pretty high. I think it was mid 30s, and there was a lot of things that could have been done to, instantly grow the practice. And Tapatío, he's just this really driven and passionate dentist. And, it was funny. I listened back to the interview to just kind of refresh my mind on everything that happened, because I think we probably recorded that sometime in like June or late May or something like that.
Yeah, it'd been a bit.
And it occurred to me too. It was kind of humbling, because I'm like listening to myself, which I normally don't do. And I'm like, man, I was really bad at this. And I specifically remember like going to George about this practice. I was like, hey man, this guy's looking for like he's looking at two different practices. I don't know how to interview them. There's like these separate P&Ls and stuff, and I don't even know how to look at it. And of course, George comes on flying blind and is like, why haven't we bought this yet? And he made it a point to make that really obvious in the episode. And so, man, I just got to mention like how poorly I was mentored in that situation.
Did he tell you beforehand that he was gonna like roast you on air like that?
No, not at all. I mean, I was just like, hey man, I could really use your help on this one. I was just starting to do solo interviews, and then he came on there and just like, man, just really crushed me a little bit. And so I gotta say, I'm kind of proud of my own leadership in that I'm fairly certain I've never been that condescending to you on any of these episodes. So I'm proud of that. I've never had any reason to. You never give me a reason to do that. But I got to say, man, brutal.
I could give you a reason if you want me to. No, but yeah,
I know
it's definitely is funny to see like how far both of us have come in a relatively short amount of time. And like same with you. Like going back listening to my early episodes, I just don't want to do it. I just really don't want to.
Oh man, well, it's definitely been a journey, and I think Tapatío kind of matched us in terms of growth, if not more. He's done some amazing things within the practice, and it's still kind of in a germinal phase. And I'll let him explain that for you guys. But yeah, this is life from the other side of a practice acquisition. So hope you guys enjoy it. Just strap in, and love to see what you think. Welcome back, everybody. I am super excited for today's episode. We are just over about a year or so of the pursuit of ownership. And today we're going to have on our very first follow-up episode of a former practice underwater, person, or rather pre-ownership underwater person, that is now coming back to show us what life is like above water. And so we were kind of looking through our list of people we recorded with, and we remembered one in particular that so many people have asked us about, and that is Tapatío. So here I am today recording with Payton, and we have Tapatío back on to share with us what's been happening the past 6-7 months or so. So Tapatío, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be back.
Yeah, man, for sure. Like I said, people have definitely asked about you. And I remember specifically, I think it was Kirby from our coaching program dropped in our message group one day, and he was like, where can I find a Tapatío practice? How do I do that? And like, that was his like question of the day that he really wanted to know about. How do I find a Tapatío practice? And, it'd been some time since we'd recorded that. I think it dropped in July of last year, and I'm not sure exactly when we recorded it, but it's been a little while. And so, Payton and I both kind of listened to that episode back and wanted to kind of, refresh our mind on what all was going on. So we'll kind of do a little bit of a recap of that and kind of establish for people who either haven't listened to it or haven't listened to it in a while, and kind of give them context of where we were back then. So as I recall, you and Miss Tapatío were looking for a dental practice to purchase, and you'd found an office that was essentially two different offices that were kind of being listed as one, and they had like a combined collections of about 2 million or so, was it? Somewhere in that region. And, a lot of things looked really good about it. And I wasn't totally sure at this time. I was still kind of hesitant about, doing these interviews. And so I'd asked George to come on, and, I was like, hey, George, like, I'm looking at this guy, and this guy comes to me. He's got like 2 practices and stuff. I'm not totally confident in my ability to look at that. And he comes in and says, why the hell haven't we bought this practice yet? And just makes me look like a total fool. And listening to it back, I got to say, George really made me look pretty foolish on that one. So I'm going to have to give him a what for pretty soon. But
don't feel so bad. I mean, I felt kind of foolish. So I had been a long time listener, right? I probably listened to like 90+% of the episodes. And so
awesome
to see this practice and then George like say, why aren't you buying it? I kind of felt,
you don't buy it. I do.
I'm like, okay, well, what am I? Did I not listen to the same episodes?
Right.
It's so different when it's your own situation. Yeah. I'm sure you can vouch for that.
So Miss Tapatío made a good point, and after I listened to the episode, to listen to the episode, you hear a lot of like fear in what I'm saying, right? Yeah. Fear of the unknown, like what if, a lot of what ifs, and I still have that, but you kind of have to get over that, and just. There has to be a certain amount of trust and just going forward.
Yeah.
So.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I really like what came of that too, is we kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, and we kind of said that, the fear is not something that's endemic to the opportunity. It was something that was going to be there no matter what was on paper. And what was on paper was really one of the best practices we'd ever seen. And I think, I want to hear about how you kind of navigated through that fear and went forward with the practice. So if you wouldn't mind, just kind of give us a rundown of, what happened after we stopped recording.
Yeah. I mean, so after I got George's blessing, I said, okay.
Well, my blessing too, by the way.
Yeah, and Tyler's blessing. We went through all the normal channels and CPA and attorney and whatnot. And a CPA actually was really on board. So that was a plus, because I had looked at other practices with CPAs, and like George says, they're pretty darn conservative. So for the CPA to get excited about the practice was definitely a good sign.
Yeah.
Honestly, the hardest part to actually get to the purchase was just the banks. So part of the reason, I don't know if you guys remember, but one of the practices, the female doctor, her practice had pretty much been in decline since she bought it. And so the banks, being COVID era, were pretty standoffish about it. And really the only bank that came through for us was Lendeavor.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, there was another big name bank that kind of yanked our chain and pulled us along, and then fell through at the very end.
I see.
So that was a bummer. But yeah, I mean, we're in the practice now. And so had we known the dynamics of the practice before we bought it, more of that fear probably would have maybe stopped me from buying the practice. But essentially, one of the docs bought an older doc out, and she had been in the practice for 4 years. And for whatever reason, her relationship with the other senior doc fell apart after a year. And so in this practice, they no longer spoke to each other, the two doctors.
Oh my God.
And they only
But it was a shared space, right?
It was a shared space, no walls, and they shared desks next to each other, and they only spoke via sticky notes. And staff from, I swear to, yeah, and staff from either side they were not allowed to speak to each other. So you can imagine how hard it was to work in practice for 3+ years like that.
So they just had like like an invisible Berlin Wall just going through the practice. This is insane.
Yeah, they couldn't agree on things, and so so the week before we took over, her front desk quit. So we took over the practice, and we immediately had to find another front desk because it's a busy practice, right?
Yeah.
We're talking, every day there's at least 3 hygienists. Some days there's 4 hygienists plus 2 doctors. And so you can imagine, like today, I think we had 47 patients on the schedule. So one person can't do that. So we had to immediately hire somebody, and that has worked out well. And so that was the first like HR navigation we had to do.
Wait, can we expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like just like what was the process like? I mean, I know you were just getting into it. You probably haven't had a whole lot of experience with hiring.
No.
What was that like for you?
Well, we definitely leaned on Suzanne as our coach. So we're with shared practice of coaching, right? And so that helped a lot. We leaned on her to kind of know what to do, and a little bit with our payroll company, that kind of a thing. And we leaned on the staff too. So we're in a smaller rural community, and so they know the dental field is small, so they know who's an important player and who has a good reputation. And so they knew someone that was looking for a job, and so we reached out to that person, and it just worked out. Yeah. I mean, in the beginning when you buy a practice, I think you just have to, I think your key staff members are gonna stick out like a sore thumb right away. I think you have to be kind of like cautious because you don't know who to trust in the beginning. And so, trust but verify. But as time goes on, I think you'll find like who you can really lean on. And if you have a good working relationship with the previous doc, you can ask them, who you should lean on in the practice. Because honestly, I mean, I know a lot of us listen to this podcast and we think about like the bottom line, right? Like we want to be owners because we have the freedom and, like yada, yada, the money. But the hard stuff, at least for me, and the stuff that really matters is, like the lead, like, can you be like a leader? And I'm still working on that. Cause I've always been an associate, and, can you handle HR because you have people involved, and people are challenging. Everyone is unique and different. And so for me, at least, that's been one of the biggest areas of like where I know I need to grow.
Yeah.
Because, initially I was like, okay, we need to increase production and this and that. But if you don't have a team behind you and you don't have, unity in the office, it's going to be hard to do that because patients can tell too.
Yeah. So. And if I could interject. So, one thing I didn't follow. So when you came in, those 2 doctors were not on speaking terms. No. Which ones left and which ones were still there? Or were they still there at all?
Both docs left. Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah. The other doc was a male doctor, older senior doc. He retired. He's really involved in the community. And we still have a good relationship. We have a good relationship with both. I think that's important too. Just because they don't like each other doesn't mean we have to dislike one or the other. Yeah. And staff have their favorites, right? And we just kind of say, okay. But yeah, he's still in the community, and so he has a lot of goodwill, and so we want to maintain that goodwill.
Okay. Okay. So like the separate staff, they were not talking to each other either?
No. And so like,
wow.
Yeah. So like, we have, and there's still some animosity. I mean, we're trying to work on it.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just interesting dynamics for sure.
Yeah,
and what's funny? Suzanne kind of called it. I mean, she's got a lot of experience, right? But
Of course,
before she even met the staff or knew, she said, I bet they're really looking forward to having one boss, or Miss Tapatío and myself. And it was totally true. So
yeah, I bet, man. That reminds me of I saw this. This is dumb. I saw this thing on Facebook. It was like two brothers who had been separated across like the border of North and South Korea, and they got to see each other after so many years. I feel like that's kind of the moment that must have happened in this practice when the staff was finally able to like actually talk and not just pass. That's the craziest thing I've heard,
isn't it? And like to share a desk next to someone for 3 years.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is like kind of we were talking about in the first episode you were on is like if you look long enough, like you're gonna find a red flag and practice opportunity. Like it's gonna happen. But overall, it still sounds like it turned out to be something that really was good for you and good for your future.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that, I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, right? But
right,
just to kind of harp on, buying a bigger practice is better. Is like, there's so many patients, there's a lot more cushion to like mess up. The note's always going to be there, but the note relative to your income is not crazy. So, I would rather have that cushion to mess up. And then, with all of these patients, there's so many more knobs to turn. If I had bought a smaller practice with all these issues, I would feel a lot more stressed out. But knowing that I have like almost 50 patients coming in the door in one day, I mean, there's a lot of room to increase, right?
Yeah, I think one point that was made in that episode was it was a question of like, do we take a big note with big income versus small note, small income? And I think that's a really great point that you bring up to kind of lend to that, is that there are more knobs that you can turn. It's a larger office, you're seeing lots of patients at a time, and ultimately there is a larger cushion that grows proportionally as well. So that's definitely benefited you. I can see 50 patients a day, that's crazy.
I mean, it's not always. Today's our busiest day because we have 4 hygiene.
Wow.
But I mean there's
that brings my heart joy.
Yeah,
for hygienists.
And I have to do a plug. I could not do this without Mrs. Tapatío. She's
of course.
She does a lot in the practice, and I definitely couldn't have bought this practice without her. So
yeah. So break that down for me. So it's yourself, of course, and Miss Tapatío, and I think you guys were going to bring on another associate so you could have some freedom to take vacations.
That's in the future, yeah.
Okay.
So we haven't quite gotten there because we're still meeting all the patients.
Yes.
One of our problems right now is we have a list of 700 patients that need to get on the schedule. They're overdue.
Okay.
Good problem though.
But we don't have space, so we need to add more hygiene days, and then that means, Ms. Tapatío and I get to work more days. So we're kind of like going backwards so that we can go forwards.
I see. Yeah. So already like having some capacity issues in what was already like kind of a large practice, and you had all these ops and stuff, and you're trying to reactivate these patients. That's an interesting challenge. And was that something that you kind of anticipated going into it, or was it something that kind of became more obvious to you through the coaching and stuff?
I mean, Suzanne kind of called it. The thing was, there wasn't a lot of data to go off of because they were using a really outdated practice management software. So they were like mostly on paper charts.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I would say, if you have a practice that's on paper charts, there's probably a lot of things that are being missed and room for improvement. So I wouldn't necessarily look at paper charts as as a bad thing. I mean, as long as the income is there and the patients are being seen, then I think you can really improve on things, right?
That's interesting because I think a lot of people will see paper charts and they kind of run from it because it's like, oh my gosh, like I gotta, get everything moved over, bring this thing into, the current state of the world. But at the same time, like I think you also bring up a good point there is the chances are there's plenty of inefficiencies that are not being seen, and you're looking at, an office that's being about as poorly run as it could be on those paper charts, like almost invariably, like if you bring it up to date and you get the metrics and you look at it, there's going to be some low hanging fruit there. So that's actually really interesting. So like if you're willing to go through the pains of, getting things converted over, what was that process like?
Well, so there's honestly, there's been a lot of pain points, I guess you could say. So So switching from it's called Datacon. Switching from Datacon to Open Dental to even get that ball rolling and initiated took longer than I thought. So we, people say like wait, don't change anything on the staff. I would disagree with that. If it's going to make their lives easier, even if it's hard in the beginning, just do it. Just pull that Band-Aid off. So the software didn't switch very well. So we had to pay a lot of overtime and have staff coming on weekends, and they were stressed to switch over insurances and things like that. So, and we're still cleaning that up. And we're finally getting like usable data. It's just taking time.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say is it's kind of hard because, by the nature of buying a practice, but, we started the process of credentialing before we even purchased the practice, like a month or so.
Mm-hmm.
And because of COVID, Delta Dental took almost 4 months to get us credentialed. So for 3 months, our patients were getting letters saying that we were out of network and a check.
Yeah.
So we have about over $250,000 in AR that we need to collect.
This sounds incredibly on brand for Delta.
Yeah. So thank you, Delta, for always being really great to doctors. And so, I mean, if you basically my tip to other docs is if you are pretty sure you're going to buy the practice, try and get credentialed right away. I mean, everyone says that, but especially during COVID times, Delta just takes forever.
Yeah, and it sounds like you try to get ahead of that. But with everything going on, it just got even worse. Yeah. So we do have an episode for anyone listening that is specifically about insurance credentialing, which initially sounds like a really stimulating topic, but it's just it's such an important thing to have covered. So I highly recommend people that are going to be buying practices pretty soon to give that one some time, because exactly what Tapatío just said is something that can happen. And man, you just don't want $250K in AR. That's just something else.
Yeah. So I mean, luckily the patients have seemed pretty receptive, but
Good.
They get a letter and they're like, "Oh my gosh, new doctor's not in network." Yeah. And then they call us, upset, and then our front desk has to like say, "Okay, no, it's okay. But can you please give us that check?" And it's just like,
yeah, and that's a lot of people to be calling too. Like, this is a fairly large practice, really high flow.
Yeah, so I mean so they basically have been, it hindered them because they were busy with the conversion. They were busy trying to collect this AR, and then so our production, our doctor schedule suffered. It's finally picking back up again, but I would say in the beginning just expect some growing pains. I think I was kind of naive, and I was like, okay, right away we're going to be making X amount of dollars, but realistically we actually haven't even paid ourselves. And we've been in the practice for coming up on 4 months now. So that's I think that's one of the reasons why the banks want you to have some extra cash, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. So. Makes sense. Yeah, it's actually kind of a miracle that you were able to kind of get that through at all. With everything that was going on, I feel like a lot of those issues were kind of relevant to COVID, but I mean, that is a difficult transition to make, and it sounds like a lot really did get put on your staff. All right, that does it for the first part of Tapatío 2 Electric Boogaloo. Payton, what do you think?
Dude, it's hard to keep it together when you're saying this. Electric Boogaloo? What is that?
Honestly, it took a lot for me to even get that on my mouth, and then I didn't have anything to say afterward.
Oh gosh. No, it's just really cool to hear how he's kind of progressed from looking at the practice to where he's at now. It's I'm struggling to even come up with words for it. It's very rewarding to see people that have gone through it and are on the other side.
Yeah, and I think one thing that kind of struck me about it too is like this was, judging from our initial interview, it was just this slam dunk thing, and even though it was on paper, at least at that point, there were a lot of things that just came right out of the weeds and were super insane. I mean, can we talk about this invisible wall that was happening?
Dude, absolutely incredible in the worst way.
Yeah, and this like unwritten social contract that neither team can actually converse with each other. That was absolutely one of the craziest things I've ever heard. And I'm so happy that came out on this show. But Well, I think it.
Go for
it. Anyway, what I was going to say is that it just kind of goes to show that even if you have a banger on paper, like there's still, once you get into some due diligence, there's all kinds of like weird, like kinky things that can be going on in a dental practice. And even after that, like you don't necessarily know exactly what you're walking into. And man, Mr. and Mrs. Tapatío really walked into the line of fire with that. But yeah. I think in that situation, it was really good that the existing dentists were walking away and the staff were, getting a chance at a new start. And I'm sure they were ready for it, because that is one of the most hostile, passive aggressive, literally sticky notes.
I haven't seen that since middle school, honestly.
I've seen it on TV shows. I didn't know that was really a thing. And it is. And they did it for a long time. So yeah, that was really impressive. So just, I think it was really, if Tapatío and Miss Tapatío did not already have the skills that they needed to succeed in that environment, they certainly developed them very quickly. And I think they just, they went through this gauntlet of having to just be leaders. And, they could have read all the books and listened to all the podcasts in the world about how to navigate situations like that and how to, get the HR down when you're walking into a situation like that. And it wouldn't have done as much as just being in that situation and just being mind ready for those kinds of challenges. So I was super impressed that they were able to weather that and lose one front desk. Wow.
Yeah. And it was before he even got there. Or before they even got there. So,
oh yeah, right.
Really wasn't even on him.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. So, it's only been 4 months or so, but it sounds like they've kind of been through a lot already and trying to convert the office to digital records and get things rolling. And they're still there. And it sounds like he's starting to have some fun and the office is really chumming along. I think he said it was 40 something patients?
40 or 50 even.
Yeah, just like every day. You've got to have a pretty well-oiled machine to have that going through and not come home with, pulling your hair out. So that was also like super impressive too. So many little things in terms of how they handle their culture.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was really impressed just with how quickly it feels like they adapted to a practice this size. There is 2 of them. But it really feels like a lot of the, things that he expected to be happening with the practice or things that he was worried about didn't necessarily come to fruition, which is honestly super refreshing to hear because I think a lot of us kind of assume that the first 6 months to a year of a practice is just going to be really, really tough and it's going to be really stressful. It's going to be a lot on your plate. But him being 4 months in, he sounds like he's in a lot better place than I feel like a lot of people would assume that you would be at that point.
Yeah, for sure. I know it's been a fast 4 months for them, but they've handled it really well. And I think the difference is not the practice itself as it was; it's just their ability to kind of weather those things. And you can just tell there's so much more confidence coming from him. And he's still dealing with a lot of things right now, but him and his wife both. And but there's just been this mindset shift that's kind of happened by necessity. I think we may have talked about it in this first part here already, but Tapatío is in our mastermind and I've been able to see, the kind of conversations he engages in on the Slack. And it's been really cool to see him be supported by the other docs that, are either in the same position, or about to be in the same position or, have been in that position, been there, done that, and lived to sell the t-shirt or something like that. Is that the phrase? I don't know.
Lived another day, lived to see another day. Yes, that's it.
I think it's a totally different thing, but you get the point. So just to see him supported like that and to see them have so much growth has been really impressive. So you guys are, I'm sure, going to want to hear more about this whole situation and how it's all kind of shaping up, but you're going to have to wait till next week, unfortunately. Bide your time and you'll be hearing from Tapatío next week. So I hope you guys enjoy it.